Okay. Good morning, everyone. Today we are going to start with the payroll session. Sorry, we have lost some 13 minutes of time as I couldn't find the login. So I will try to cover within 2 hours. Now, let me share my screen. Okay, so I hope you all have received this agenda of payroll training. I will go through all of these subtopics today. First, I will discuss the roles and responsibility that is required for the Fusion payroll, and then I will go through the payroll setup tasks. What are the tasks are required to complete the payroll setup in Fusion? I will give you a brief overview of payroll and the payroll processing. Then we'll go through the data loading process in payroll. Then we'll discuss about how legal entities and payroll are linked and how the security process comes into picture. Then we'll discuss about typical payroll definition like consolidation group, time definition, and run types. And we will move into payroll elements, how to create payroll elements, what all points we should consider while creating payroll elements. And we will speak briefly about the payroll calculation cards. And then we have a vast session on fast formulas that will be taken care of in the last training session. We will have this training session over 4 days. So the last day we will have the fast formulas. Then we'll talk about how we can create element entry for employees and then run the payroll, then running quick pay, how the payroll event groups comes into picture for proration and retroactive payments. And then we will discuss about how to create bank account, then how payroll costing happens, and then how the payroll security works. And at the end, we will see the payroll testing cycle, like how to create a new hire and then attach elements and payroll and bank details to the person and then complete a full payroll cycle and then verify the payroll run results. Now, this payroll is entirely dependent on the HR setup. So before going into the payroll setup, we have to make sure that our payroll requirement, our HR requirement gathering is complete. And we have the basic work structure like legal entity, business unit, and employee information in place. Then only we can go into the payroll. Now, I will start with the roles and responsibilities that are required for the payroll processing. Now, there are 3 main roles required for payroll. One is payroll manager, then payroll administrator, and payroll specialist. Now, from the HR core HR sessions, I believe you are aware that how to attach payroll to how to attach roles to an employee and how to create data role on top of job roles. These are all job roles: payroll manager, payroll administrator, and payroll specialist. Now, for the payroll manager and payroll specialist, we need to create a data role. Payroll administrator is a job role which we can directly assign to the particular person. Now, when we assign this payroll roles to an employee, then let me go back to the system. I will show you what extra we can see in the navigator. Okay, so when we assign the payroll responsibilities, this extra section comes up in the navigator. So under which we will see payroll dashboard, checklist, payroll calculation, payment distribution, accounting distribution, regulatory and tax reporting, and administration. Now, each of these areas have different functionalities in terms of payroll. We will come to each of them. The payroll manager role is majorly for running the payroll, running quick pays, and the payroll manager role is very similar to the HR specialist as well, because as a payroll manager, you need to do the HR data checking of an employee, whether the employee is assigned to the correct legal entity, whether the employee has the right job and grade definition attached, as well if the employee has the bank account attached to the person, and you should be able to run the payroll for the employee as well. As a payroll administrator, you should be able to do a bit more setup related information. For example, you should be able to set up elements, you should be able to set up payroll, and you should be able to set up calculation cards as well for the legal entity. And as a payroll specialist, you will be able to run the reports. Payroll specialist is basically this particular work area, this regulatory and tax reporting and accounting distribution. These two comes under the payroll specialist task. But most of the time when we go for implementation, we assign all these three roles to the payroll team. I mean, all the members of the payroll team. Now, the next slide, I have given three important points. It will tell you how the legal entities are related to payroll and tax reporting. Now, there are three points. One is legal employer and payroll statutory units, or PSU. Next is payroll statutory units and tax reporting units, or TRU, and how the TRU and the legal employers are linked. Now, we have seen the implication of a legal employer from the core HR session. Legal employers are entities who are eligible to hire employees or to issue offer letter to an employee. Now, whether a legal employer can be marked as payroll statutory unit, that depends on your requirement or the client policy. Now, it may happen that 3 or 4 legal employers report to one particular payroll statutory unit. So, or there could be one-to-one mapping of legal employer and payroll statutory unit. So you may or may not mark all the legal employers as PSU. That depends on your requirement. Now, if you see this particular, the definition that I have given, that payroll statutory units enable you to group legal employers so that you can perform statutory calculation at a higher level. So basically, PSU are responsible for tax calculation. So in one country, if there are 5 different legal entity, because you have 5 different companies who are like your, maybe your subsidiary companies, but since the tax related information are dealt by only one legal employer for all these 5 legal entities, then you mark that legal employer as PSU. Then next one is PSU and tax reporting unit. Now, in the payroll statutory unit and tax reporting unit, they have a parent and child relationship. So the payroll statutory unit becomes the parent and the tax reporting unit becomes the child. Now, when you create a legal employer, it will ask you if you want to mark that legal employer as a PSU as well as a TRU. So I'll go back to the system. If you go to the workforce structures and look for the legal employer definition, you go to the workforce structures, and under that manage tax reporting unit HCM information, and look for the legal employer. You will see this legal employer is marked as a tax reporting unit, or TRU. So if you mark this legal employer as a tax reporting unit, you will be able to use this legal employer for tax purposes in payroll. And when you create the legal entity, at that point you can mark it as a PSU, or payroll statutory unit. So after this definition and linkage, I have put one more slide here. It will make you understand the difference between the HR model and the payroll model of the employee. So if you see from the top, in this in this example, we have only one PSU, that is SunPower US. Under that, there are two legal employers. One is Manufacturing US, another is Installation US. So basically, there are actually three legal employers. The PSU is also a legal employer, which is marked as a PSU. Under that, there are two more legal employers. Now, if you see one employee data, how the employee HR data and the payroll data shows this parent-child relationship of the payroll and the legal employers. Now, see on the left-hand side, that is the HR model. I've taken an employee called employee X. This employee has got two work relationships. One is with a permanent employment, which is with the Manufacturing US legal employer. Another is a temporary employment, which is with the Installation US legal employer. Now, you can have two different work relationships with two different legal employer, but both cannot be of the same type. So here, that's why he has one permanent and one temporary. Now, since these two legal employers have a single payroll statutory unit. So if you go to the right hand side in the payroll model, you will see he has a single payroll relationship. Under that, he has got two terms. One is permanent and one is temporary. So from HR point of view, he has got two work relationship, but he has a single payroll relationship because both the legal employers report to the same payroll statutory unit. So both of them, I mean, for both the legal employers, the tax things are handled by a single payroll statutory unit. So for the payroll model, he has got only one payroll relationship, but for the HR model, he has got two work relationships. Most of the time when we do implementations, we don't do this kind of an analysis that how many payroll payroll statutory unit we should create and how many legal employers we should create. What we do is we create the legal employers and we mark each legal employer as PSU. So in majority of our implementations, how that many legal employers we have that many PSUs. So the HR model and the payroll model look the same. But if you go for a proper implementation with proper analysis, because most of the time it is difficult to get the information from the client rather than the right information from the client, that who actually does the taxes for each of your legal employers. So instead of spending time in that kind of requirement gathering, we mark each of the legal employers as PSU. So the HR model and the payroll model looks the same. The employee, if the employee has got two work relationship, he will have two payroll relationship in that case. But if you can do a proper requirement gathering and a proper mapping, then you can find out that there is only one payroll statutory unit for all the legal entities. And if you have a complicated requirement, like your employee has got two work relationship, he has a permanent work term with one employer and another temporary work term with another legal employer, then you can do this kind of a mapping. You can have multiple work relationship, but under a single payroll relationship. Okay. Now, you have any question on this, or I'll go to the next slide. Now, next is payroll calculation cards. Now, this is a new thing introduced in Fusion, the payroll calculation card. This was not present there in EBS. Now, for the payroll to be run successfully, the employee mandatorily needs to be attached to a social insurance details card. Now, how this social insurance details card is created and how it gets attached to the employee, we will come to that later when we go into the setup. But there could be 4 different types of calculation card. Employee social insurance details. This is mandatory for the employees to be created in the system. Now, if you while creating the employee, if you put the nationality, then automatically the social insurance detail comes into the system. If you do not create nationality, then you separately need to go and create this insurance details card. This is nothing but an element entry in the employee's element entry details. Next is the gratuity payroll calculation card. Gratuity calculation card comes into picture when you terminate an employee. So if you have created the proper links and everything for the gratuity elements, then if you terminate the employee, the gratuity card sits into the element entry. For the absence and time card, these two calculation card, they are based on the absence entry. So your absence calculation card sits into the element entry if you have an absence configured, and then time card comes into picture if you are using the time and labor module. So in the time and labor module, if you have an approved time card and that is transferred into payroll, then this time card payroll calculation cards get created. Now let's go to the system and see where exactly all this information sits in the system. So I'm going to my workforce person management. Searching for an employee. Go to the task on the right hand side. So if you see this payroll link, under that all these sub menus actually refer to the employees payroll details. Manage costing for a person is the employee level costing. When we will go to the costing session, we'll talk about this. Next is manage payroll calculation information. This is the place where you will see the calculation cards. So for this employee, you can see the employee social insurance calculation card is in place. This card is mandatory. You need this card to be present for any payroll activities to be successful for the employee. Now, if you open the card, you can see that there are on the left hand side, you can see component groups and association. Component groups is important. If you expand the social insurance details, then you will see this has got a lot of information, like it includes the citizenship of the employee. Then there is one more checkbox if the person is registered for social insurance or pension. So since we do most of the implementation in the UAE, this social insurance card is very important because this decides whether your employee is eligible for gratuity or not. If the person is eligible for social insurance, that is if the person is a local, then he is not eligible for gratuity. So if this checkbox is yes during the hire of the employee, then when you terminate the employee, automatically there will not be any gratuity processing for the employee. But if this checkbox is unchecked, then the system automatically picks up the gratuity calculation card during termination and pays off the gratuity. If while hiring the employee, if you enter the citizenship of the employee, this card gets created automatically. If you don't put the citizenship during hire, then you need to create this card separately. Each calculation card is associated to a particular legal entity. It is actually the legal entity into which the employee's current assignment is. So if you click on the association, it will show you the tax reporting unit of the employee. So this is how the social insurance and the tax reporting unit of the employee is related. Now, after the calculation information, there is manage personal payment method. This is for the entering the bank details of the employee. Here you can enter the payment method name and whether it is a percentage type or amount type payment method, and you can enter the account number and the IBAN details of the employee. But remember, in Fusion, for creating bank details, you need to complete the GL side of setup or the finance side of setup. So you need to have the chart of account in place. You need to have the finance side of information in place. Then only you can create a bank and you can add a payment method to the employee. Next is manage payroll relationship. Manage payroll relationship is for holding your payroll related information. So here you can assign to which payroll the person belongs to. You can have more than one payroll if the employee is paid by more than one payroll at one time. And then you can control the element entries from this manage element entry links. Now, when you create the calculation cards on this social security or gratuity, automatically it creates an element entry in the manage element entry screen. Now, there are multiple ways of element entries that can be made in the system. Now, there could be manual entry. That is, we can directly go to this screen and click on this plus sign to create an element entry for the employee. We can select the element name and put the value and save the information. That is one way of entering the elements. Next is we can use the batch element entries. We can use the batch loader for creating the element entries. Then we can have an automatic element entry. This depends on the setup. So if we have a business policy or if we have a business decision that certain entries are going to be automatic for all the employees whenever they are hired, or depending on some condition, we can do that at the setup level. So if the element setup is such that it is enabled for automatic entry, then whenever the employee is hired into the company, the element entries get created. And then there could be element entries by other processes. Other processes means sometimes through compensation or through salary basis assignment, the element entries get created in the employee screen. So salary basis is like the method of payment for an employee. So most of the time when we create salary basis, we give the gross salary for the employee. Now, when we put the gross salary during hire process, it gets created in the element entry screen. So all these activities that you saw from this task screen under the payroll menu item can be done by a payroll manager or a payroll specialist. So now next is we will go into the element details about how to create a payroll element. Now the payroll element are necessary for making payments to the employee. So in order to understand what is a payroll element, we can think like this. When we get our pay slips, and there are different our salary is divided into different parts. So when we are contracted in the company, we may have a gross salary, but actually our salary is divided into things like basic salary, housing allowance, and transportation allowance. So these each entity in our payslip is called as a payroll element. So there are lot of considerations which leads to how many elements we should have. As an example, we could think about the basic salary element. Um, Basic salary is generally a recurring element which we receive every month, and there could be non-recurring element. Non-recurring elements are like bonus or like unpaid leaves. So there are a lot of features of an element which we will discuss. So let's see the element creation screen, the setup screen, how to set up an element. For the element setup, we need to go to the payroll calculation work area. Under the payroll calculation, we will see manage elements. Okay. So here using this add symbol, you can create a new element. I will open an element and explain the features. Now this is the basic salary element. While creating the element, it will ask for an element name. You can have only one unique name of the element, which is the element name, and then there is a reporting name. So the element name and the reporting name may be same or different. Reporting name is the thing that comes on the employee's payslip. So you may have basic salary with the reporting name of basic salary, and you may have basic salary arrears with the same reporting name as basic salary. So what happens is the utility of having this reporting name is that if two elements have got the same reporting name, they adds up in the payslip. So when we get our basic salary and our basic salary arrears in the payslip, we see it as the same element because we give the reporting name same. Next is the primary classification. Now the primary classification available, which all primary classification is available, that depends on your legislation. So in some of the legislation, involuntary deductions are not available. Some of the legislations, direct payments are not available. So if you go through different legislations like UAE legislation, you will see only a particular list of values are coming in the primary classification. So this is standard earnings. Since UAE there is no tax, so the standard earning classification comes into picture, and there are other classifications like voluntary deduction, then employers charges, which is for pension. So which all classifications you see in the drop down are actually a result of the legislation. You cannot create any extra classification. In the category, you can find standard, and another category is there that is called time card. If you mark any element as category time card, that will come into that will display in your time card. Then next is recurring entry, and there could be two values, recurring and non-recurring. Recurring entry means once created, this particular element will keep repeating every month. So generally the basic salary, housing allowance, all these are recurring entries, and non-recurring entries are, they will start from the date of entry and end at the end of the month. Then next is standard earliest entry date. Now I have a, if I go back to the slides, I have an explanation of all these earnings date in a separate slide. I will go back there and discuss it. Let me discuss the other things here. In the entry values, we have automatic entries. We discussed it previously that if any element is marked as automatic entry as yes, then whenever you create an employee, this element will sit in the element entry automatically. You don't need to create it separately. Allow multiple entries in the same period. Generally for the recurring elements, we do not allow multiple entries in the same period because you cannot have two basic salaries or two housing allowance. It cannot happen. But if you think about unpaid leave or at basic salary arrears or overtime, that can happen multiple times. So as a rule of thumb, recurring entries, we do not allow recurring elements, we do not allow multiple entries in the same period, but non-recurring elements, we can have multiple entries in the same period. In case if you really need to allow multiple entries for recurring element, you can enable this additional entry checkbox. Then there is processing options, process in payroll run. If this option is checked, this element will be picked up in your payroll run. Next one is process once per period. If you do more than one payroll run for an employee during the payroll cycle, then this element will be processed only once. Now, if this checkbox is unchecked, then every time you run the payroll for an employee, this element will be picked up. Now, that kind of classification we do for elements like the pension elements, because the pension needs to get processed every time you do a payment. So the many times you run the payroll for an employee, the pension elements should get calculated. So while creating the pension element, you need to uncheck this process once period flag. Priority is important from the design point of view, because priority decides that when an element should get processed. So lower the priority, the first the element is processed. So standard earnings element generally have a processing priority of 2500. There is a range of processing priority. So ideally, the deduction elements have a higher processing priority than the earnings elements, because for having deductions, you need to have earnings. So when you do fast formulas, that time you will see that how we can play around with the processing priorities for designing the elements and the fast formulas. Then there is skip rule. Using skip rule, we can write fast formulas where we can specify that under which circumstances this particular element should be skipped for an employee. Under the duration rules, there is earliest entry date and latest entry date. Earliest entry date specifies when should be the first entry for this element, and latest entry date is when is the last entry for this element. Generally, the earliest entry date is the hire date of an employee, and the latest entry date is the termination date of the employee. Retroactive processing. For the retroactive event, if the retroactive event group is configured for this element, then when you run the retro payroll, then this element will be picked up. We will discuss about retro payroll later, how we process retro payroll and how we decide which factors are responsible for retro. So basically, retro is to pick up entries from the past. So suppose we are in the month of September, and we get a promotion which is effective from the month of January. So from January to September, all these months payroll, you should be paid in arrears. So retro is the factor which takes care of this arrears payment. Then we have proration. Proration is important because proration determines your middle month payment. So if you are hired in the middle of the month, then you don't get the full month salary. You get the half month salary. Similarly, if you are terminated in the middle of the month, you get the half month salary, 15 days salary, like that. So by creating proration group, we tell the system which are the factors responsible for prorating this element. So it's not only for mid-month hire and mid-month termination, this is for the mid-month promotion or transfers as well. So if your salary depends on your grade and your grade is changed in the middle of the month, then in the first part of the month you will be paid based on your previous grade, and later half of the month you will be paid based on your current grade. So you can configure your proration groups accordingly and attach to the element. Then the element will prorate depending on the condition mentioned in the proration group. Now, as a rule of thumb, recurring elements are most of the times prorated, and retro also is enabled for the recurring elements. Now, after the basic details, there is input values. Now, when you create elements in Fusion, depending on which classification you choose, the input values are automatically generated. And on top of that, you can create additional input values. Now, if it is a standard earnings element, then automatically the pay value will be created in the system. Now, the pay value is responsible for any direct feed values. So if you have a pay value entry for an element, this element will not be, whatever you enter in the pay value will be paid directly to the employee. This element will not look into the fast formula, is whatever is assigned to the element. Majority of the time we use input values for doing our calculation. So basic salary or housing allowance, whatever element you have, there has to be a rule of calculation for the element. So you can say that your basic salary is let's say 50% of your gross salary, or your basic salary is a particular value given during the time of your hire. So if there is a rule associated with the elements processing, then you need to write a fast formula and add it into the status processing rule. So you can see under the status processing rule, there is a formula called basic salary earn. This has got the formula feed, and the formula holds the calculation logic of the element. But if there is no calculation logic, it is just a straight pay value for the elements, then you can put the value in this pay value field and the system will not look at the fast formula. When you create elements in Fusion, it automatically generates a fast formula template for that element. So you can go and modify that template formula and put your own business logic. Next is element eligibility. When you create the element, the eligibility will be blank. You need to create the eligibility, otherwise this element will not be available for the entry. Now there are various factors which determines which what we should create in the element eligibility. Now if you remember, we were talking about element automatic entry. So automatic entry you can do at the element definition level, or you can do at the link level also. Other than automatic entry, there are a lot of other factors which can determine your eligibility criteria. So you can have payroll statutory unit. So you can say that this particular element is applicable only for people who belongs to this particular PSU. Then you can choose the PSU and save the link. So only those employees who belongs to this PSU will be eligible for this element. You can say that this element is applicable for only this legal employer. So accordingly, you can configure this element eligibility. You can do department, job, grade, employment category, people group, location, position, and payroll. Basically, all your employment screen fields are available in element eligibility. Then we have default entry values and validation. Sometimes we need to restrict the input values that we enter for an element. So if we say that we have an amount input value for an element and we want maximum and minimum values applicable to the element entry, so we can have a calculation formula or a validation formula which will limit the entry in that particular field. Now let's go back to the slide and see the date and the description for each of the date types. Now if you remember this element description, there was a duration rule. So the duration rule is actually governed by these particular dates. There could be 4 different dates for an element setup: first standard earnings date, last standard earnings date, last standard process date, and final close date. Now if you specify the first standard earnings date, most of the time it is actually the higher date. Or if you do a transfer of an employee to a new legal entity, then it would be the transfer date of the employee. So the description of the first standard earning date is the date when the standard earning starts accumulating, and date used is the higher date or the effective date of change. So either is the higher date or the change of payroll date. Last standard earnings date is the date when the standard earning stops accumulating. So most of the time it is the end of term or termination date of the employee or the end of the payroll date of employee. Last standard process date. Last date that at regular payroll process can include elements for normal processing. So last standard process date is the last day of the payroll period. So if you have an element which you have marked as last standard process date, then that will be available until the last date of the payroll period. So if an employee's termination date is, let's say, 15th of June, and he has an entry which is made after 15th of June, so that element will be available for processing until 30th of June. That is the last day of the payroll period. Then there is something called final close date. Final close date is something that is beyond the last standard process date of the employee. So if you are terminated on 15th of June, your last standard process date is end of month, but final close date can be even further. So final close date is applicable for elements which is processed long after the employee has left the company. So if you have a stock market plan or a bonus plan or long-term incentive planning in the company which gets generated every 3 years, then you can put final close date in the particular element setup. So if you specify any element setup as final close date, that element will be available even after the employee has left the company. This is a setup related activity, like which of the dates are set automatically and which are editable. So the first standard earnings and the last standard earnings date and the standard process date is set automatically. First standard earnings date is your hire date, last standard earnings date is your termination date, and last standard process date is the last end of the payroll period. And which of these dates are editable? First standard earning dates is not editable. Once you are hired, this dates automatically starts. Last standard earnings date is also not editable because it is the same as your termination date. Last standard process date is set automatically, but still you can edit it. You can move it further if you don't want it to be the end of month. Final close date is always editable and is never set automatically. So what happens in final close date is this element never ends until you set the final close date manually in the system. And user defined time definition, this is one additional feature that is in Fusion, that there is one more date field in the employee payrolls definition. This date also you can set it manually. So if we go back to the employee payroll definition once more, then try to understand all these dates from the payroll window. So you can see in the time definition, at the moment there is only first standard earnings date, that is the hire date of an employee. Now if this employee is terminated, then you will see the other dates like the last standard earnings date, last standard process date, and final close date. So once this employee is terminated, all those extra 3 dates will come into picture. And this is the place from where you can change the value for the final close date and the last standard processing date. You have any questions so far? Okay, so I will go into the payroll data loading process. Now, the payroll data loading is important because, as I discussed, that the only way the employee can be paid is through the element. So it's important that when the employee is created, there are elements in the element entry screen. So let's have a look in this employee's element entry screen for manage element entries. You can see lot of element entries for this particular employee. See the source column. The source column tells you from where the element entries has come. So the first element entry, the name is okay. Yeah, so you can see the element name. First element is social insurance. It has come from the deduction card. So when the employee was hired, at the time, this social insurance element was picked up from the nationality of the employee and was applied directly into the system. Then he has got an element called absence deduction check. It has also come from element entry. So when an element source says element entry, then it can happen in 2 ways. One is by using the automatic entry link or by using the manual entry from this screen. And then if you see the car allowance element, car allowance payment element, the source is batch element entry. So batch element entry is the way of doing mass upload of the elements into the system. And then there are other sources like benefits. So if you have benefits module implemented and you enroll employees into benefits plans, that also can create element entries into the employees element entry screen. Now, for mass upload of payroll data, we need to use batch loader in Fusion. I will discuss about the process of how the payroll batch loading happens, but before that we have a prerequisite. We need to install an Excel plugin called Desktop Integrator. For that you need to go to the navigator and then under tools you can see download desktop integration installer. This you need to download in your desktop. This is an exe file. Once you download this, you can run the exe file, and as a result your Excel will have the extra additional tool called desktop integration. Now once this is installed, you can use the payroll batch loader. Now the version of this desktop integrator changes with different release. So every time you get a new release, you need to refresh your desktop integrator. Now for the payroll data loading, you need to start with batch loader. So using the batch loader process, you need to create a batch and then enter lines into the batch. Once the batch lines are created, you can transfer the batch, which will create the element entries. So in order to do this, you need to go to the payroll administration work area. And then go to batch processing, batch loader. Now, when you go to the batch loader, it will ask for batch loader spreadsheet download. If you click on download, it will download the batch loader on your desktop. You need to open this desktop generic batch loader and create the batch here. Now, if your desktop integrator is installed correctly, then this spreadsheet will open up with extra plugins. It will ask for your Fusion username and password once more. Well, my desktop integrator is actually release 10, but this is release 11. So that is why it's not allowing me to open it. I have to install the release 11 integrator. It's taking some time to open the desktop integrator. I will go back to the system and show you how we'll transfer the batch. So let's assume the batch has been created using the spreadsheet loader and uploaded into the system. Now we need to go back to the, okay, I got a request if we can have a break for 10 minutes. Okay, sure. So see you after 10 minutes. Now you know that your batch is created successfully if the batch content sheet shows the batch name appended with the legislative data group. So my batch name was test123 and the legislative data group was A legislative data group. So you can see test123 hyphen legislative data group is the batch content sheet. Now if you don't see either of them, most of the time this data group doesn't come. So you have to go back to the batch header sheet and then again invoke the batch by double click and come back to this sheet. Now this is the batch name. Now under this batch you have to create the batch lines. So for creating batch lines you need to know for which element you need to create the element entries or the mass upload. For that you click on add. Now once you click on add, it will show you the task. It's quite small. I have a problem with the Ultrabook, that's why the windows come very small. Now it has got three fields: task name, task action name, and reference. Um, either you can put value in any of these three fields to get the actual task name for the mass upload of element. Now this particular spreadsheet, this batch loading spreadsheet is used for various other purposes. I mean, other than element entry creation, it is used for various other purposes, like it is used for uploading bank details in mass. It's used for creating your user-defined tables. It's used for creating element setup in mass. So you need to find the right task name for doing the mass upload of elements. Okay. Yeah, so the task action name is create element entry, and you can find the element name from the third column. So the reference column is actually the element name, and the task action name column should be create element entry. So while searching, you can, if you know that you are going to update for the, going to do a mass upload for the basic salary element, so you can put the basic salary in the reference. Okay, so let's assume that we are going to do mass upload for basic adjustment element. So select the element name and click on OK. Now you can see that the task name is created here. Now the instruction given here is double click on the task action to select it. So you double click on this create element entry. It will once again invoke the action, and now you can add the lines to the batch. So you come further down and you can see that under this task action of element entry for basic adjustment, you can put the employees who are eligible for this basic salary, basic adjustment element. So you can give the line sequence as 1. Effective start date, you have to give the date from which you want the element entry to be effective. If the element is a recurring element, then you need to give the effective start date. The effective end date will be blank. If the element is a non-recurring element, you need to give the effective start date only. In that case, effective end date will be automatically taken as the end of month. You need to remember here the effective start date you need to give in the reversed order. So if you want the start date to be 1st Jan 2016, you have to give the year first and then month and then day. You need to put the person number over here. Rest of the fields are non-mandatory. You don't need to give any of them. Only the input value which you want to give. For example, if you want to give the pay value or the amount, you need to put that particular input value here. Now, once you have given all these details, you can add multiple lines here by using insert. So maybe you want to insert, let's say 10 lines, you can just shift down arrow and click on insert. So you can see all these lines will get created and you can create as many entries as you want. Most of the time it is instructed that you prepare your lines in a different Excel sheet and then download this Excel sheet and copy paste the lines in this format. So once you have completed creating all the lines in the batch, you have to click on apply. Once you click on apply, this batch will be submitted into the system. So I am not clicking on apply. I have created the batch only. I have not added the line because it is client's instance. So I don't want to create the element entry for the employee. So once you click on apply, it will show as row inserted over here in the batch line status. Now after this, you need to go back to the system and run the transfer process. The transfer process will make sure that your element entries have been created in the employee assignment. So for running the batch, you have to go back to the payroll work area, payroll administration, and then go to task and go to payroll flows, submit a payroll flow. Sorry, I went to a wrong link. It will be administration, submit a payroll or a process flow. Submit a process or a report. Now here you need to choose the legislative data group for which you're going to run the process. It has to be the same as the one you have chosen while creating that batch header. The name of the process, you can mention the name here as transfer. The actual name of the batch is the process is transfer batch. You select the flow pattern and then click on next. Now for submitting any particular process or a report, you need to give a name to the payroll flow. I'm just giving a test name. And the next is the batch. Here you have to choose the batch which you have created in the spreadsheet loader. So click on the search and search for the batch. You can see the batch has come up, the test 123. You need to select the batch and then click on submit. So once you submit this, then you need to wait until the batch process gets completed. Once the process is completed, if you go back to the Excel sheet and just switch the sheet, you go to the first tab and then come back to the second tab, it will show you whether the batch line status is successful or in error. So in this way, you can do the mass upload of the element entries. This one is very important because most of the time the client doesn't do the payroll calculation in the system. They get the payroll data or the element entry data from a third party and upload it directly into the system. Also, if you do not have time and labor implemented in Fusion, you can use this mass element entry process for loading time card data into payroll. Okay, so this was all about the payroll data loading. Now, another interesting part of this payroll data loading is you can make it automated. So the entire process that you do, like downloading the spreadsheet, creating the batch, putting the batch line, and then going back to the system, running the transfer process, the whole thing you can replace by using a web service. So there are separate documents available on Oracle which talks about how to automate this data loading process. So if you come across that kind of a requirement, then you can refer to the document and create that web service for automating this payroll data load. Now we have already spoken about the element entry methods, different methods. Now if you don't have any more questions on this, I will go into the payroll processing, the broader payroll processing thing, the whole payroll cycle, and we'll see for which part of the payroll cycle we should go to which area of the payroll navigation. Okay, so now this looks like a very big process flow, but this is how the payroll has been explained in Fusion. So in EB's, if you have worked in EB's payroll, the payroll process, the nomenclature is a bit different and there is not so many processes involved. But in Fusion, they have included a lot of processes and grouped them under different kind of names. So the process may look very big, but inside they refer to actually the same payroll processes that the standard payroll flow works on. So let's see from the top. Now for any payroll system, for the payroll to be run, there needs to be two things. One is there has to be the employees, there has to be payrolls, payroll definition attached to the employees, and there needs to be the payroll elements, because the payroll formulas and the payroll engine runs on the payroll definition and the payroll elements. So our first question is how the element entries are going to come into the system. Now if you see the first box, it says time and labor, absences or benefits. So the element entry can come in three ways. It can come from time and labor, it can come from absences. How absences come into picture is that if you are on unpaid leave or if you are in a paid leave, your absence configuration determines that how your payment should be deducted for that particular duration of absence. And then benefits are another way for getting element entries. If you are attached to benefit plans like medical benefits or dental benefits, then you may get some money every month for the same. So this is how your element entry screen gets populated with elements. Now, next is maintain payroll personal information. Payroll personal information is like you maintain your employees' payroll data, you maintain your employees' bank details data, and you maintain your employees' um, assignment related data. So before running the payroll, you should be ready with all this data. So HR data is important for running the payroll. So you have to complete your new hires processes before running the payroll. You need to make sure whoever has got promotions or whoever is terminated, all those data changes should be completed before you run the payroll. Because after you run the payroll, then all these changes will not come into picture. So if an employee is terminated on 15th of the month, then before running the payroll, you have to terminate him in the system. So then only the employee will get the prorated payment. After running the payroll, if you terminate the employee, then it's not going to make any change in the payroll. So every company mostly defines a cutoff date before running the payroll. So the HR team is instructed to make all the necessary changes before they run the payroll. So manage payroll transaction, the second box is actually taking an input of these two things. One is your element entry, another is your personal or the assignment information. Then next is confirm payroll readiness. Confirm payroll readiness is which the payroll administrator does before running the payroll. They check various reports to make sure that all the data entries are completed in the system. So there are a lot of seeded reports available in the payroll, Fusion Payroll as well. We can give OTBI or custom reports for the client, so that before running the payroll they are sure that the HR data changes are complete. Everybody has got the bank details in the system and everybody has got necessary element entries in the system. Now, a lot of clients, they do not run the complete payroll. They do a payroll interface. So if you see the down arrow from the second box, it shows manage payroll outbound interface. So what they do is they stop the payroll activity at this point, like they upload the elements, they complete the assignment changes, and then they do payroll interface with a third party. So payroll interface is a completely different area, different development. So if you have payroll interface, that means you don't run payroll in the system, but you transfer your payroll related data to a third party every month so that they can pay your employees based on the assignment changes or the element entry. Now, if you don't do payroll interface, then you have to run your own payroll. This payroll interface and payroll are either or. You cannot have both. So the next is confirm payroll readiness, where you need to verify your reports and understand whether your system is ready for running the payroll. And then the next process is calculate, validate, and balance payroll. Now, calculate, validate, and balance payroll, these three things actually means that you run the payroll and verify the results. So run payroll or calculate payroll is one process, and the result analysis is validate and balance payroll. Now, the result analysis can be done in various ways. Again, you can check the reports where you can reports of the payroll where you get to see all the employees data in bulk, or you can see one by one employee if you have very less number of employee, or you can only see the employees who are in error or who are not generating expected results. So most of the times what we do is we do the calculate payroll process, and if we see that a few employees are not showing the correct results or they are into error, then we move ahead with the next processes. But whoever is in error, for them the next processes do not work, so we take them separately. So we do not stop the main flow for the error ones. So for the error ones, we can later on do a quick pay and then do the post processes. Now after the calculate, validate and balance payroll is completed, next is you do the payment calculation and distribution process. The calculate payment distribution is you need to send this payroll data to some third party. Third party in the sense, once you calculate the payroll, you need to send it to some bank to pay your employee, or you need to send this data to the third party pension providers or some third party companies to do the premium calculation for your employee or to do the pension payments for your employees. So payment distribution is actually your prepayments process that you run for the to send the data to the employee's bank or to the third party system. Now another is calculate cost distribution. So both these processes you do after you complete your payroll calculation, and then you need to distribute your payroll payments. So distribute payroll payment means you need to send the data through some file format to the bank. So you call it EFT or any other process by which you send the data to the bank for the payment. And then you can do the distribute payroll accounting information, which is like running the GL related processes, transfer to GL processes, which actually feeds into the financials. That is where the process ends. And after you have completed the distribute payroll payment process, then you can do the manage regulatory and tax reporting, which is like generating the pay slip, generating the tax information for your government, all these processes. So all these blocks are actually a broader description of the actual process. So now I have prepared slides for each of these boxes. So when I go to the slides, you will see there are multiple processes involved or multiple tasks involved under each of these boxes. So keep this flow in mind. It's it looks complicated, it looks a bit big, but actually it's a very simple because we just do only 3 or 4 processes for the entire payroll. Okay. So another thing is for each of these boxes, which work area you should refer. So there is a mapping for that. For example, for maintain personal payroll information, which work area you should refer. So you can go to payroll calculation, administration or distribution. So which work area means in the navigator under payroll, which link you should refer for which task. So for payroll transaction, you should go to payroll administration. Confirm payroll readiness, you should go to payroll dashboard. So like that. So you can see here under payroll, there are dashboard, checklist, payroll calculation, distribution. So here, if you go to the slide, you can see which activity refers to which work area. If you are not using financials, then you don't need this accounting distribution or calculate cost distribution. Most of the time, we don't use this manage regulatory or tax reporting for UAE legislation. So the work area we majorly use is payroll calculation and payroll administration. Payroll calculation is the work area that is used for running your quick pay, checking employees element entries, checking employees payroll data. That is the mostly used area. And payroll dashboard is used for confirming the payroll readiness, but we use the reports that we give it to the client for checking the HR data, because confirm payroll readiness actually refers to the HR data or the element entry data. Okay. So now next few slides will explain what these activities means in a broader sense. So maintain personal payroll information. Under this, we can check the payment methods. Payment methods are like if each of the employees are having bank accounts or not. So you have seen which screen you can go and check the bank account details of the employee, but it is not possible for the HR or the payroll manager to go and check each and every employee's payment methods. So what is important is that we give them a report for the payment methods which they can run before running the payroll and check if everybody has a bank account or not. Then you can check the element entries. Element entries are like if everybody has got the salary elements, if everybody has the time card records, leave records if required. So once again, for this kind of verification, you can give them a report. Information required for statutory deduction and the calculation card. As discussed earlier, that for UAE legislation, we mandatorily need the statutory deduction for social insurance. So for that also the same report can work. This is actually an element entry for the social insurance element. So from the same element entry report they can check if there is an entry for this element. So this will complete the maintain personal information. Now manage payroll transactions. Manage payroll transactions are mainly that you can check the task flows in the payroll work checklist work area for each of the process, like running payroll, running prepayments, running archival, running payslip. For each of them there is a task flow or the payroll flow. I'll show you in a minute. If you go to the payroll checklist work area, you can find all the payroll flows. There are quite a lot of payroll flow, so you can you have to be sure that which all payroll flows you want to run, because most of the times the client doesn't use the seeded reports or seeded flows. So they will just run the payroll and then they will use all the custom reports or OTBI reports to do the post processing. The next one is the confirm payroll readiness. Under the payroll readiness, you can have things like confirm conversion rates if you're using multiple currencies. So if you are having a multiple currency payroll, like you have input currency and output currency different, or you pay in multiple currencies, then you need to make sure that your conversion rate exists in the system for the current period. And you also need to make sure that the payroll data validation report is perfect, that it will help you to identify if any information is missing for any employee for running the payroll. For example, if anybody is missing the calculation card, the payroll is going to error for them. If the payroll fails for any employee, then whoever is the payroll administrator, they get a notification that the payroll has failed for this particular employee as well. It comes in the payroll dashboard. Now, next one is calculate, validate, and balance payroll. Now, before payroll calculation or before running the payroll, we need to run the retro payroll, that is for the arrears process. So if your retro payroll is completed, then you are ready to run your main payroll. So calculate, validate, and balance payroll is nothing but using the calculate payroll process. So you need to go to the payroll checklist and run the calculate payroll, and then make sure that the output is complete. So when you run the payroll, then it shows all the employees that has been picked up by the payroll run. So, and also it shows for which employees it has completed successfully and for which employee it has failed. So you can, if you want, you can leave aside the failed employees and move ahead with the successful employees, and later on you can handle the errored employees using the quick pay. The difference between the payroll and the quick pay is quick pay is for one employee, running the payroll for one employee, and the payroll is for running the payroll for everybody. Now, how you can run payroll for a particular group of employee, that we will discuss in some time. Now the next one is calculate payment distribution. Now payment distribution is like after running the payroll, if you find any problem or any error in the payroll, you can roll back or remove them for the main run, or you can retry their data. Now retrying means you are not rolling back the payroll, but you have corrected the HR data and you are retrying the payroll action. If you do rollback, then it removes the payroll run completely. After the payroll run is completed, then you need to generate the prepayment file to complete the third party's payment and then archive the payroll results. Now for archive, what happens in the archive is the payroll results get written to a file or logical data file in the server, so that the next processes like the prepayments or the EFT or the payslip can use that data. So distribute payroll payment consists of all these processes: generate the payment to your third parties, that is the prepayment, then archive the payroll results, generate the check payments if required, and then generate the payslip. So the generate payslip process actually takes data from the archive payroll results process. Then if you have payroll costing process in place, then you need to calculate the cost distribution. You have to run all these processes to complete that. And then the final process is you can distribute the payroll accounting information. That is, you can run the transfer to GL process to submit the subledger accounting process. This will create the journal entries. This process is mainly run by a finance side of the team. Okay, so just going back to the going back to this screen. So I will show you what is the process name for each of these boxes from the system, so that tomorrow when we do the next session, we can just pick up an employee and run each of the processes and see the results. So now if you go to the payroll calculation work area, here you can use the calculate quick pay for running the payroll for one person, and you can use this verify payroll process results or verify person process results to see the details. Now if you want to run the payroll in bulk, you need to go to the navigator. Under payroll there is checklists. Then you have to go to submit a process or a report. Select the legislative data group. Now for the calculate, validate and balance payroll, the name of the process is calculate payroll. Okay, so you have to select the calculate payroll process and submit the same. So you can give the name of the payroll flow. The name of the payroll flow should be self-explanatory enough to understand for which period you're running the payroll or how many times you're running the payroll. So it may happen that you run first time and then you get some error, you roll back and then you run second time. So if it happens for the month of January 2016, so you can give the payroll flow name as Jan 2016 run 1, like that. Okay, I think the screen share is having a problem. Let me just do it again. Nivita, can you please confirm if you can see the screen now?
And now it is in the submit process or a report.
No, actually, that
Okay, let me just cancel it and already submit. Actually, it's very slow. I don't know if the instance is slow or my internet speed. Okay, let me just.
Gayatri, can you hear me?
Yeah, please, Nivedita, tell me.
Yeah, it is in submit a process or report.
Yeah,
There is a network problem in office. That's why it got stuck. I
you're able to hear me
We
now.
can proceed.
Okay.
No, it is in submit a process or a report. Enter parameter screen.
Submit a process or a report. Yes, right. But I canceled that and I'm going back to the screen again. Let me know if you're able to see the enter parameter screen. Okay, so I'm back to the calculate payroll process again. And to give the payroll flow name, and in the payroll field, you need to select your payroll name. Then you have to select the payroll period. The payroll period names start with the number of the month. So January is month number 1. So if your period is in the month of June, then it will be 6. So it will be 6/2016. That means June 2016. In this particular screen, only the payroll period, and the run type is mandatory. Now, run type could be regular or supplemental. The explanation for regular and supplemental is that regular you can do for your main run, and supplemental you can do for any run which you do after the main run. So what happens is sometimes you do more than one payroll. So you do one payroll, let's say on 26th or 27th of the month, and after that you may get some new hires. So you do a supplementary run for them. So your main run is marked as regular run, and supplementary run is for those who join later. Similarly, you can do a supplemental run in the beginning of the month for people um, who have resigned in the beginning. So if you have a person who has resigned on the 2nd or on the 5th of the month and you have to pay him, then you can do a supplemental run for those people. You can do it in a different way also. If you have only a few, like 2 or 3 people who has resigned, then you don't need to do a payroll run for them. You can do a quick pay for them. But if you have a group of people, like if you have 5 people who are late joiners, or if you have 20 people who have resigned in the beginning of the month, then you can do a run type as supplemental. There is no like very rigid difference between these two. Most of the time we use regular run and we do only one run. There is one thing called consolidation group. Now a consolidation group is kind of a labeling that we use for running the payroll. This is not a mandatory parameter, but consolidation group has got a similar significance as a run type. So consolidation group we use for labeling. I'll give you an example of consolidation group. For example, if we have a process like an advance salary process, so for advance salary, we do 2 runs for the employee. So we do the first run when we give them the advance salary. So that time we process them under a consolidation group called advance salary group, and then later on when we do the main payroll, then we need to pay him zero value because he has already been paid during the advance salary payroll. So then we select a different consolidation group for the main run. Rest of the parameters are non-mandatory. We have payroll relationship group, element group, and process configuration group. Payroll relationship group is here you can group, you can create a group for a number of employees for whom you want to run the payroll. If you don't give any parameter here, this payroll will pick up all the employees in your company. But if you say that I will run the payroll only for this named, like let's say 100 people, then you can create a payroll relationship group and select it over here. Your payroll will run only for those people. Most of the time, the companies wait for the people who do not have bank account, because if they don't have bank account, the salaries cannot be credited, and a lot of companies do not do cash payment or check payment. So what they do is they create a payroll relationship group by excluding those employees who don't have a bank account. So in that case, you have to create an exclusion set using that employee criteria, and then select the payroll relationship group over here. Element group is like you create a group of element which you can select over here, and your payroll run will select only those elements. All these are based on your client's requirement, what they want to do for running the payroll. How they want to run the payroll. So in many cases, the clients do one payroll for the payment of salary, another payroll for the payment of benefits. So you can create two element groups, one for the standard earnings elements, another for the benefits element. And then here, while running the payroll, you can select the element group and you can have two payroll flows. So there will be payroll name will be only one, but you can have one flow called regular earnings, another flow called the benefits. So once you have selected all these parameters, there is no other parameters to be selected in the next screens. So you can just click on next until you get to the review screen and then click on submit. This process will start running your payroll, and it will pick up all the employees who are eligible by the payroll engine and then complete the process for them. I will show you one payroll results, then you will come to know how it looks like. So this is the difference between the checklist and the payroll calculation. Checklist you use for running the processes, and payroll calculations window you use for checking the results. Now when you come to the payroll calculation work area, you can go to this process results window, view payroll process results, or you can go to view person process results. If you go to view payroll process results, then you need to search by either the payroll name or the process name here. So if you search by CBT payroll here, payroll name, it will show you all the payroll processes that has run till date. So the payroll process can be like calculate payroll or calculate prepayment, calculate archival, generate pay slips, like that. And if you click on the process name, it will show you the details. So if you open the, let's say, calculate payroll process, Yes, the screen is a bit slow. It's I don't know if the screen is slow or if my internet connection is slow. It's taking ages to open. So once this opens, you can see how many employees it has picked up, and if you click on the employee name, it will show you the results. Okay, so now inside the payroll process, you can see all these people which the payroll process has picked up, and if you click on the employee name, it will show the run results. And if the payroll is in error, then in the action status, it will show as red. So here you can see the run results like earnings, net pay, and voluntary deductions. And if you go further down in the run results section, you can see the values for each of the elements. So you can see the pay values of cost of living, and then come over here and it will show the value of each of the inputs. And if your payroll goes into error for any of the employees, then in this particular area you will see the error message, which you can further debug. Now for the next process, we are going back to the checklist again. Submit a process or a report. So after calculate payroll, you need to submit the next process, that is the prepayments. So every time you submit a payroll flow, you need to come to this window and select the legislative data group, and in the filter you need to search by the name of the process. This filter is case sensitive. Okay, so the process for prepayment is called calculate prepayment. You have to select the process and go to next. Exactly unlike the payroll process, you have to give the entry values here, the parameters, and then submit the process flow. The payroll flow name has to be something like month name, process name, and then run type like run 1 or run 2, like that. And you have to select the payroll name, process start date, and process end date. Most of the time the start and end date is the start and the end of the month. After the prepayment, you need to do the process of archival. So the name of the archival process is archive periodic payroll results. If your payroll fails for a few employees and then you do the quick pay for them and run them again, your prepayment runs for all of them. So you have payroll for some people, you have quick pays for some people, but your prepayment works based on your period, that is the start and end date. So whoever has got completed payroll results or quick pay results in this particular period, everybody will be picked up. Okay, so in the archival also exactly the same way, you need to choose the payroll, give the start and end date and submit the results. Most of the times we do not face any problems with these processes. Only the process that can give problem is the calculate payroll. So these prepayments, archival, EFT and payslip, these are seeded processes of Oracle. So they are correct almost all the times. Most of the time we face issues with the payroll results because either the error because of the fast formulas or employee data, or they have incorrect results. After the archival process is complete, then you need to run the EFT process, which is responsible for creating the file for your bank. In UAE legislation, most of the time we don't use the seeded EFT of Oracle, so we give a custom report to the client for sending the file to the bank. If you run the EFT process from here, you will get to see a flat file like a notepad kind of a file, which will generate your payment information, but we don't use that for any of the banks. It's important that we complete all these processes because for generating the payslip, these processes are mandatory. So even if you're not using the EFT, the seeded EFT for this client, you need to run through all these processes so that the payslip gets completed successfully, because that payslip process is responsible for viewing of online payslips of the employee. The name of the EFT process is Make EFT Payments. You need to give the payroll name, start and end date of the month, and you need to choose the organization payment method. Now here this organization payment method is mandatory here because you may have multiple payment methods for your company. So you may have payment method in one currency like AED currency. You may have, for some employee, you may have USD payment currency. So your payment method changes depending on which currency you're making the payment. So there could be multiple EFT if you have multiple currency payments. And after the EFT is completed, you have the process of payslip generation. This will generate your online payslip, which the employee can view from the self-service. Okay, so the process name is generate payslips. The parameters are going to be the same. Now, once you've completed all these processes, I think it's a problem with the instance now. Yeah, okay. So once you have completed all these processes exactly in the same order, like you have your retro payroll, then calculate payroll, then prepayment, archival process, EFT, and payslip, then you're in this same order, you need to complete it every month. Now, if you want to roll back the payroll for an employee, then you need to roll back in the reverse order. So suppose you have generated up to the payslip and now you want to roll back the payroll. So you need to roll back payslips and then roll back EFT, roll back archival, roll back prepayment, then only you can roll back the payroll. Now for roll back the payroll, you need to go to this payroll calculations area once more. I'll show you for one employee how the processes come one after another and how you can roll back the processes. Now, if you want to roll back in bulk, you can do it from this particular screen. So suppose you have run the payroll for the entire company and then you need to roll back for some reason the entire payroll. Then there is a process called rollback process. You can do it from this window. It will roll back the payroll for the whole company. So the process name is rollback process. You can do it from the submit a process or a reports window. This is the one, the rollback process. So using this, you can roll back the entire payroll or any of the processes. So here, the process name will come into picture. The particular process name that you give while running the payroll flow, you have to select that particular flow and roll back. But this will roll back for the entire company or for a particular group of people. Now, if you want to roll back for a single employee, you need to go back to the payroll calculation area. After you have run the payroll and you are verifying the results, you always need to come to this process results section and go to view person process results. You need to use this particular link frequently for any payroll issue for any employee. Okay. So let us say I want to see all the payroll results that payroll or the payroll related process like payroll flow and then all the flows up to the payslip for one particular employee. So let's query this employee. I have to choose the person number, the payroll name, date earned. If I give date earned as a particular month, then it will show only for that month. So I'm checking last year's May results for this employee. Okay, and there is only one payroll process. Let me check another month. Okay. Okay, so now you can see all the processes that has run for this employee in the month of March. There is a recalculate or retroactive payroll process. There is quick pay process. For some reason, the main payroll was not run for this employee. Then there is prepayment process and archival process as well. They did not run the payslip process. Okay, so now if you want to roll back, you have to start from the extreme last process, which is the make EFT payment process. So to select the process, click on the actions on the top and then click on rollback. So this will make sure that the particular process is rolled back. Now, if you do not select the last process in the payroll sequence, then you will not get the rollback option. So here, if you want to roll back the quick pay, then if you do not roll back the EFT, the quick pay will not have the rollback option. So here you need to roll back first the EFT, then roll back the archival, then roll back the prepayment, then roll back quick pay, then roll back the retroactive process. This is the sequence. Then roll back. So I think I'll finish with this today. If you have any question, you can ask. Or tomorrow we will go into the payroll run and we will go into the setup of payroll definition and then we will go to the payroll run.